On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, the Oklahoma City Thunder take care of business against the Charlotte Hornets. SGA has a gaudy stat line in 3 quarters yet again. A wire-to-wire win. How the Thunder pull this off?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. We're here talking about the Thunder taking care of business. I'm your host, Rylan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder and beat writer for Thunder on SI. You can find me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. We're talking Thunder Hornets, where the Thunder get a season series sweep over Charlotte. Not the most impressive thing in the world, but it is still important to take care of business, and they only have one loss against the Eastern Conference, which is still a big deal because, I mean, if they can wrap up this season with less than 3 losses against the East, they will put themselves in uncharted territory for the league. Joining us today is Brandon Rahbar, media luminary, 1077 The Franchise, KREF, DailyThunder.com, Twitter extraordinaire. Brandon, how you doing today?
I am doing well. And first off, before I say anything, kudos to you and your hat. It's the perfect night to wear this hat. For those who are listening and can't see, they're not watching on YouTube, he's wearing a Nick Gallo hat. And of all nights, I think the highlight of this game, which, I know it's not on your show notes, but was the Nick Gallo post-game interview.
It was. He stole the show, talking to Nick after the game. Obviously had no idea that was going to happen. And we started to theorize, like, what's the next step? And I thought that maybe this was the final form of, like, there's nothing they can do to top this. And then me and Nick were talking back and forth. And I think that the only move now is to see how many jerseys you can slide over his head during the post-game interviews, because they've done the towels. They did the warm-up and jersey attachment today. The only way up from here would be to just pile on all 18 jerseys onto Nick Gallo. So we'll see if they can keep coming up with unique ways to celebrate Gallo, celebrate wins on the post-game show. They've had plenty of chances at it, 58 wins, which now surpasses last year's win total. And Brandon, when you get down to the brass tacks of this game, was it impressive that the Thunder beat the Hornets? Not on the surface level, but when you look at this team, they've clinched the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. They've clinched their division playoff spot, which goes along with that number 1 seed in the West. They're down J-Dub and Dort and Oos, and they're playing a Hornets team who is a whimpering, sad, depressing, dying dog this season. I mean, you're holding on to Lassie a bit too long. You know it's going to come to an end here. This group does not want to be on the floor. And the Thunder didn't just get by. They didn't just win, because you take all those factors and you also include that the Paycom Center was fine. Like, there's never a bad Paycom Center night, but this certainly wasn't a banner Paycom Center night, crowd involvement and crowd energy wise. So this was a game where you had to bring your own energy and you had to take care of business. And the Thunder did that. The Thunder held serve with their 0-0 mentality, and they were able to just get the job done. And when you're looking at this team, and if you're one of those fans, and I don't blame you, because following the rest of the NBA takes a lot of time. If you're watching the Thunder night in and night out, that's about the max basketball capacity most people can have. But if you are one of those fans, you look around the NBA, that doesn't happen, right? Because we try to dismiss these wins, and you look at Denver. They got swept by the Washington Wizards. The Washington Wizards swept Denver. You look at Cleveland, who is a similar team as OKC, both record-wise and makeup. Because the pass you can give to Denver is like, oh, they don't care anymore about the regular season. They don't care anymore about playing Washington. They can't get up to play Washington anymore. Cleveland is still chasing that top seed overall for the entire NBA through the NBA Finals with OKC. They're right on their heels, and They lose to a Suns team, which again, the Thunder got no credit for blowing out that Suns team, but it's not impossible to lose to them. And in fact, Cleveland got beat 123 to 112 tonight in Phoenix. So it just goes to show you it's not easy to continuously have a business-like approach to these games the way that the Thunder do. And it's not easy to avoid a slow start and avoid having to make a furious comeback or avoid having to play with your food, let them make it a game, and then you go and catch them, the cat and mouse game of it all. The Thunder, from the word go, a wire-to-wire win where they grew a 35-point lead at one point at the very end, never had the lead change hands, and they shot the lights out of the gym, 57% from the floor, 53% from three, and 70% from the free throw line, and they dominate in all the important categories: fast break, second chance points, points in the paint, dominate on the glass. 16 turnovers for Charlotte as they were just kicking the ball all over the place. Brandon, what do you make of this game overall from OKC?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most underrated things about this Thunder team. It's like the big wins that stand out. Obviously, the Celtics wins, the Cavs win, those Nuggets wins. Those are the ones, obviously, that you're going to think about that get all the headlines. But even the elite teams, you know, they'll sometimes play down to the competition. They'll struggle. Like just Wednesday night, I was thinking about Wednesday night because we saw how the Timberwolves lost to the Pelicans, the Knicks lost to the Spurs. I mean, the Grizzlies lost to the Trailblazers. Like the Thunder just does not have games like that. This could have been one of those nights. Now it is the Hornets, and that is like a different level of like tanking team. But even still, there was never any doubt.
Well,
from
New
the
York
jump.
lost to these Hornets last night.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the Thunder come in and they just dominate. 35 points. There was one stretch where the Hornets got hot. They hit a ton of threes, like right in a row, and they got it down. It's going to say funny to say this, but they got it down to 10 points. It was still double digits, but they got it down. It was a 25-point Thunder lead. They got it down to 10. Daigneault takes a timeout. They come out of that timeout, and they go on an 18-0 run. So like the one time OKC was threatened tonight, they respond with an 18-0 run. They end up winning by 35. And every single player that played tonight was a positive and the plus minus, which just kind of goes to show the top to bottom dominance the Thunder played with tonight. They did not play down to the competition. You know, the whole 0-0 mindset, the whole mentality that the Thunder have, like sometimes it's kind of become a meme and kind of a punchline. But it's one of the big reasons why this Thunder team is so successful and why you see this team continuously beat the teams they're supposed to beat and not get any of these bad losses because they take every single game seriously.
Coming up, let's talk about SGA's game. Let's talk about this Thunder team individually as they set, a franchise record tonight in the midst of this game. But first, I want to say right now, my good friends over at FanDuel, March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting the nets down. Make sure you check them out today because even if you're not into the madness of March Madness, there's still NBA options out there for you. But visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long and the NBA because the Saturday slate in the NBA is full of games. You can see the Bucks in Sacramento, sneaky fun game there where the Kings are +1 at home. You got the Lakers and Bulls where the Lakers are 10.5-point home favorites, and the Washington Wizards could be frisky. Getting 15.5 points, I might throw a few shekels down on the Wiz Kids at FanDuel.com. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Bonus edition of Lockdown Thunder as we're doing this for our sixth pod of the week with Brandon Rahbar. So it'll be a little bit of a different format, but still the content you came to know and expect of Lockdown Thunder. Brandon, the Thunder saw SGA go out there and score 30 points, 9 assists, 6 rebounds, a steal, and shoot 72% from the floor and 2 for 2 from 3. And only had 2 free throws all night. Brandon, he makes these games so normal, but they should not be normal. This should not be something that is forgotten about in less than 12 hours, in less than 2 hours. Like, people aren't talking about the game from Shai enough. Every team gets a chance to play the Hornets at least twice, and
Right.
guys aren't putting up 30 points on 72% shooting from the floor. What would you make of that?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I don't care who the opponent is. I don't care if it's the Hornets or the 90s Bulls. Anytime somebody goes out and gets 30 points, 9 assists, 6 rebounds, a steal, and shoots 13 of 18 from the field, 2 of 2 from 3, and perfect from the free throw line on only 2 free throws in only 3 quarters, it should be talked about. But Shai has been so dominant this season. He's been so elite. He's been the MVP of this season, clearly, that he's kind of made a game like this mundane. Like nobody blinks an eye. Like if you go on social media and somebody posts that he had 36 and 9 and he shot 13 of 18 against the Hornets in 3 quarters, everybody's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's what Shai does. But we shouldn't just shrug and say that's what Shai does, because this should not be a mundane line. It's still something that you should like not take for granted. Like, as a Thunder fan, as an NBA fan, as an NBA analyst, like you and me, like, we've kind of become desensitized to it. And I think that speaks more than anything to Shai's greatness, that a line like this can just be like ho hum.
And that's the craziest part about it, is that a line like this will go under the radar and it won't be talked about when it is so thoroughly impressive. But Brandon, speaking of, your role as an NBA analyst, and you've done this longer than I have, can you think back to covering the heyday of this, Russ KD franchise? Like, I'm struggling to think of a year where, before the calendar turns to April, on March 21st. Now, this is not how they're viewing it internally. Let me be clear. But externally, you're looking at the calendar and you're like, man, what's there really to play for? Like, you got everything wrapped up on in a pretty little package for you on March 21st, and you feel like you feel good about this team. Feel like you know what they are. Feel like you know who they are. You know where their seating is. You know that they've won the division. Like, even those teams, and they're still chasing the best record in franchise history, on pace to get that. But like, there's not very many seasons like this for the Thunder, for any franchise at all.
The fact that the Thunder clinched the number 1 seed in the West before any other West team clinched a playoff berth whatsoever is absolutely nuts. This does not happen. And so, yeah, you do wonder down the stretch, what do they have to play for? I mean, I think that there are some milestones that you could play for. Like, you want to see them break the all-time Thunder record, which is 60 wins. Well, that's going to happen, obviously. You could play for the number 1 overall seed in the NBA playoffs, because right now it's the Thunder and the Cavs. Now, the Cavs lost tonight, so the Thunder actually have now, I believe, a 2-game lead over the Cavs, because after winning 16 in a row, the Cavs have now lost 4 in a row. So the Thunder have the number 1 seed right now, so you can play for that. The MVP resume for Shai gets boosted with every win, I think, because the gap between 1 and the rest of the field in the West gets larger and larger with every win. But really, more than anything, Rylan, you're just kind of wanting to get to the playoffs healthy, but also in a rhythm. The Thunder are still working some things out. Chet is still getting implemented, after missing such a huge chunk of time. They're still working on the double bigs, and they're going to get Jada back. They're going to get Lou Dort back. So you want to have all these guys healthy and playing and getting to a rhythm. Like, will they all play the last couple of games against the Jazz and the Pelicans? Probably not. The Jazz and Pelicans are going to hand over those wins on a silver platter, no matter if Shai, Dub, and Chet are playing, or if you and me are playing, Rylan. They're going to want to give those games away. But I do think that the Thunder want to play for a sense of rhythm, to collect more data on the double bigs and the other lineups, and to finally get a fully team healthy and playing together and getting a rhythm going into the playoffs.
Brandon, it was a smaller group today post-game with Mark and the players, but Mark did make a couple good points. I think that on the what to play for thing, I think that it's felt more like that on the outside looking in because of who they've played this week. They haven't played anyone of note, but Mark talked about how, their upcoming stretch, like 12 games, is still a lot of games. It's still a lot of games to find out stuff and to work through stuff and then improve on stuff. but also of these games, like most of them are against teams currently in playoff positioning. All but 2 of them are against teams currently in playoff positioning. So this weekend, you go to the Clippers, you go to Sacramento, then you come back and play Memphis and Indiana, and Chicago's in the play-in, Detroit now on national television, go to Houston, LA, Phoenix, and then you end up with the Jazz and Pelicans. But like that stretch will immediately flip the mindset of like, oh, what do these games mean? Because if you do think that the Thunder should chase the Cavs, like that'll be a very important stretch for both teams, clearly. But also, just like looking at this weekend alone, the Clippers and the Kings are 2 very likely first-round opponents for Oklahoma City. And like you want to get the data on that, and you want to see how each team matches up. So like that, like quickly, I think that we'll get out of the mindset of like, what does it all mean? I think that's more so a byproduct of who the Thunder have played over the last, because they've had so many off days, 2 days off before the Philly game, an off day yesterday. Then you play this game. But really, it's about to get really serious really fast. And he made the second point of, they have a week off. Like he was asked, like, how do you avoid coasting to the finish line when it feels like it's all kind of solidified? They have a whole week off before their first playoff game. That's a rest versus rust situation that you want to make sure you're running through the finish line, because you don't want to coast, kind of lose your rhythm, lose, like you were talking about, lose your NBA conditioning even, then have a week off, and then you're playing the most important game of your life, game 1 as a number 1 seed, that lap the field where everybody's gunning for you, and it possibly could be against a team like Minnesota. Like if things went wrong for Minnesota in the play-in tournament, or Golden State now with the Steph injury in the play-in tournament, they could be your first-round matchup, and that is the best 8 seed we've ever seen if that were to happen. So I think that there's not going to be this notion around that the rest of the schedule. It's going to be really fun, really fast to watch this team finish out the year, while even chasing like how far can you get past 60 wins to have your franchise best record.
Yeah, because honestly, I'm not saying it's going to happen or that they're shooting for it or anything like that, but 70 wins is actually still on the table. If they were to win out, that's obviously a huge milestone, but even getting to 65 is a really, really impressive feat. I think you make a great point when you bring up the Clippers and Kings, 2 possible first-round matchups. Also, they play the Suns here down the stretch. Suns, a possible first-round matchup. So all these games you have coming up, you get the Lakers, you possibly see LeBron and Luka in a doubleheader in OKC. Like, eyes are going to be on that game. And I think if the Thunder, if they're playing their guys, they're going to want to, win those games and make statements, even though they really don't mean anything as far as wins, losses go, because they have the number 1 seed clinched and wrapped up. But it means something if all those eyes are watching you, because it's LeBron and Luka and the Lakers, and you have all these possible Western Conference playoff matchups coming to town. So yeah, I think despite the number 1 seed being clinched, I think this Thunder team is still going to be focused, and any guy that steps out onto the court is going to want to win that game, and Mark Daigneault's going to coach to win those games.
Yeah, and they're not going to probably win out and win 70, but like you mentioned, 65, 66, 67, 68, like that's all on the table, because this team's proven that they're going to be able to win. You look at Portland and Philadelphia. Like, if I told you that they just outright punt Utah in New Orleans, that does not mean that they outright lose those games. They could still win by 20 in those games without any of their starters, as they've proven against tanking teams throughout this season. So it is fascinating to see how far that climb can go. And that kind of I'm very curious, like now that we understand that thought process is in the mind, at least, of Mark, about how you are managing a whole week off. And he felt that last year. He's now seen it with what his team responded to. And I look at last year's series, and the first game of the first round against New Orleans that you eventually swept, it was the only game New Orleans had a chance to beat you, a prayer to beat you. Was that due to the week off and messing with your rhythm? I mean, they only rested 1 game. That final day of the regular season, they rested, so they got a full 7 days off instead of what would have been 6. But nonetheless, like I do wonder how much he plays into that, as we talked about on yesterday's show before Mark even said this. So very curious about all that stuff down the stretch. Brandon, we're going to have it covered here on OKC Dream Team, dailythunder.com, Thunder on SI. What non-Shai player stood out to you the most? Because I'm asking this because you have a pick of the litter, and your answer will be different than mine. I'm almost going to guarantee you, because the Thunder, for the 4th time in club history, saw 8 players crack double figures I mean, are you kidding me? Like, so who is it? Pick your fighter on this.
You could pick any number of guys. Like you said, I'm going to go with Cason Wallace. And here's why I'm going to go with Cason Wallace. He had 11 points, which, 8 guys got double figures. So it's not one of the highest ones, but it's the way that he got it. And what stood out about Cason, like his finishing at the rim, I don't think we've talked about enough this season. Like he has changed his game. It looks completely different, his offensive game, than it did last season. Last season, it was mostly catch and shoot threes. This season, he has taken it to the rack so much more often. And he has, dare I say it, some SGA-ish finishes at the rim, like some finishes that you don't think are going to happen. He had like 2 tonight. And he had one that really stuck out. He laid it off of the glass, but it was like at the very tip top of the glass, like with this finesse and feel. I'm just so impressed with him. And he had the trademark swipe, fast break dunk that Cason seems to get one of those per game. He also had 2 steals, a block. I just think that Cason, not necessarily that he jumped out the most, but he just keeps doing what he does consistently, like elite defense. J-Dub after the game tweeted that he should make one of the all defensive teams. So the defense there every single night, you just cannot throw a pass in Cason's vicinity. You can't try to go one-on-one on Cason, but then his offensive game is like expanding this season. And I've been really impressed by it.
Brandon, this is the beautiful thing about hosting a show and making up your own rules. I'm going to get 2 for 1. You only got 1 player, and I'm only going to give you 1 player. I'm going to go 2 for 1. Give me both Arkansas Razorbacks, not just because that they beat my Kansas Jayhawks in the tournament yesterday, but I mean, J-Will follows up a triple-double with 14, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 for 5 shooting from 3. Like playing in a 23-minute role, he was a plus 21 in the game. I thought J-Will was ready to go instantly, playing in a different role, a vastly different role than he played in on Wednesday, but it still translated over to this game. Obviously, poor opponent this game, just like on Wednesday. But nonetheless, I thought J-Will was really good tonight. And then Isaiah Joe. I mean, 4 for 9 from 3, 5 for 10 from the floor. Anytime you can get that production off the bench from Isaiah Joe in 20 minutes, it's a big deal. Like if they can just bottle that up and keep him shooting efficiently from the floor and from the 3-point line, they're going to have a lot of success this season. But Brandon, this was fun. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Brandon Rahbar. I'm Rylan Stiles. And until we recap this Clippers game, be good to one another.